So I'm here at Brands Hatch very early in the morning, and today is a day that I've been anticipating for months and living in abject terror of the past couple of weeks. Today is the first round of the Radical SR1 Championship, and somewhat unbelievably, today I'm going to be driving in it. So I'm going to be driving in the first 2 rounds. The whole thing about the Radical SR1 Cup is that it is for beginners. No one on the grid will have completed more than 7 races. I've got qualifying at 9 and then 2 20-minute races. So I think my strategy is to take it easy for the first race, come home in one piece, and then second race, not quite balls to the wall, but maybe push it a little more. See how it goes. Exciting and terrifying at the same time. That's pretty much the feeling I've got right now. So I'm going to go and sign on. So this is the Radical SR1 Cup. It's got 185 brake horsepower from a 1.3 litre 4-cylinder Suzuki bike engine, but it weighs just 480 kilos, so it's got the power to weight ratio that would trump most supercars. Now, last time out when I drove this, I found it an absolute dream to drive. It was so communicative and responsive, the kind of car that Radical do so well. It just talks to you. You just feel a connection to it that you don't get from other cars, and of course, this is a true race car. The thing is, today in the wet, I feel that's going to be a completely different proposition. This thing doesn't have traction control, ABS or power steering, so a lot's going to need to come from the driver, and I know my limitations all too well, so I feel that this is going to be the strongest link in the team today. Qualifying would last 20 minutes, and this would determine where I'd line up for both races, so getting a good time was absolutely key. The problem was I found myself in the middle of the pack on Brands' short Indy circuit, and the first few laps were spent refamiliarising myself with the circuit and the car, which had not driven in quite a while. In the meantime, I was getting a lot of blue flags as much faster cars were needing to pass me, so frustratingly I never felt as if I got really into the flow of things or got a proper lap together. So just come out of my first and only qualifying session for the Radical SR1, and it was difficult. It felt for the first few laps I was just trying to get to grips with the car again. I felt towards the end I could get all the corners hooked up individually, but I didn't have one lap where I had it all. This track is bone dry at the moment. We got out before the rain, but the wind's picking up, the humidity's high, the clouds are ominously kind of dominating the horizon in all directions at the moment. It is going to pour it down, and I've never driven this in the wet, and it's going to be difficult. I found out my time was 56.4 seconds, only good enough for last place and 17th on the grid. I was 6.4 seconds away from pole position, which was light years away on a circuit as small as this, and a second behind my nearest competitor in 16th, so I'd really have to up my game if I was going to be competitive in this race. Okay, so I'm in the cockpit, I'm strapped in, the engine's running, we're just about to be called for my very first motor race. The track looks very slippery, very wet. We've had quite a few red flags on other previous qualifying sessions of people going off, especially at Paddock Hill and Druids. It looks treacherous out there. I've never driven this thing in the wet, and I'm told it can be quite unpredictable. The guys have softened up the dampers for me and taken off the rear bar, so that should give me a little more stability. It'll be a little more predictable, a little softer. The fear from this morning is gone. Having gotten out on the track, conditions be damned, I'm extremely excited. Just warming up the tyres, which feels very surreal. The adrenaline's really starting to flow now. I can feel it in my legs. Here I am lined up. 5 seconds. This is the start of the race. This is very scary. As the lights went out for the first race, my start was pretty good. True to my promise, I didn't dive up on the inside of Paddock Hill Bend. I kept it calm and waited to see how things would play out. As it happens, I had to move quite quickly to avoid a stalled car that was on my side of the grid. My confidence grew as the race progressed, and I began to close in on car number 5. I realised I could soon make a move. Unfortunately, it was at this point that my video game training decided to kick in, and I dived recklessly on the inside in what can only be described as a monumentally stupid move. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Richard Wilson, Nick Wilkinson. Oh dear, and Richard Wilson says, I don't believe it.
So we're in a safety car period now, and I guess it's time to talk about my accident. Like a complete idiot. I was last but one, closing in on the guy just a little bit lap by lap. Saw an opportunity at Druids and pretended it was PlayStation.
After the 20 minutes race, my best lap was 55.6 seconds, 0.8 of a second quicker than my qualifying lap on a damp track, which just showed the difference just a little bit more seat time can have.
So end of the first race, and as you may have seen, I had quite an embarrassing moment. I had to do some explaining to the clerk of the course. You felt the car a lot more, the dampers being softer in the corners, you felt it turning, and I really actually liked that. Felt like a big improvement for me, and I felt like I was doing well. Actually, the car just in front of me, I was keeping the gap fairly consistent, actually closing down on him, and then at Druids I had a bit of a rush of blood to the head and thought I was on a video game and went to overtake when probably didn't have enough way overtaking. I definitely saw an improvement on the qualifying. Even though the track was drying, I actually felt I drove a lot better and got to know the car. So, goods and bads really. I don't feel too good having to report to the Marshal's office, but they were fairly understanding.
Once again, I got a good start off the line, managing to pass two stalled cars, and I found myself closing up on car number 5. However, wanting to avoid yet another trip upstairs, I decided to brake a little earlier than usual at Clearways, the final corner, which would give me a better run through the corner and a higher speed advantage through the straight. Amazingly, it worked, and I spent the rest of the race in some sort of fantasy, tussling for position, pushing the car harder and harder, finding the limit and, well, racing. Sod's Law meant that it was the last handful of laps where I really felt I'd started to get to grips with it, but in a blink of an eye it was all over. I'd achieved my aim, finishing both races and not finishing last in either. I'd not pushed as hard as I possibly could have, but it was nice to be able to hand Radical back an undamaged car. Well, almost.
Woo. That was absolutely unbelievable. What a difference to the first race. Bone dry track, really hot, just amazing racing. If I didn't get it in the first race, or it just built up the knowledge throughout the first to help me in the second, and it just felt so much better. But just the whole experience was just unbelievable. I've never felt more in complete harmony with the car. It just felt unreal. I was, holding my revs and thinking, this is mental. I'm on a racing grid. Yeah, I'll never forget that experience. Unforgettable.